have stuff in it.
Okay.
So if we're still recording when show and tell starts, you definitely don't want to make sure we remind us. But yeah, so this is kind of a fun day. We get to show each other, show what's going on. Evan has some things to follow up on, and we'll talk about how to serve your collections. Then we'll do show and tell, and at the end we'll talk about kind of next steps with CollectionBuilder with our different types, some of the applications that are there, and then our two kind of larger static projects, live static and learn static. We'll talk briefly about those. So not those, that won't be too long, but just to kind of give you the future or where you could go from here. But it's been a real pleasure to work with you all this week and to see what you've done. And it's Evan, Olivia, and I have been talking about how much it's been great. It's just been great. So thank you very much for your engagement and your time. Evan, I will pass it off.
Yeah, everybody deserves a little round of applause for sticking with it and doing some really interesting stuff and asking some good questions and getting a bunch of sites that work, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. Y'all didn't have your own digital collections. Well, some of you might have, but y'all have working digital collections, which is cool. Any follow-up? Did anyone get far into the about pages and interpretive pages or create any new pages? And anybody understand? Everybody's kind of getting an idea of like how those includes work and where to find them and where to find the documentation for them. Did anyone run into questions there that that they wanted to bring up or revelations?
We addressed Katerina had an issue with her dropdown where, you know, with it just had one space after a comma and then it doesn't work. So it's just that extreme attention to detail. You know, that's what you kind of need for this work. And sometimes when things are breaking, you just got to go back and be like, where is that extra space? Where is that? Is it on the end or is it in the beginning? So that's one thing that happens a lot, just to remember.
So I'll start sharing my screen over here. Yeah, and the other thing I think is, you know, there's been a lot of stuff. We've covered all kinds of things in this this week, and it's pretty overwhelming. And so don't feel like that's abnormal that it is overwhelming, because it is. And one thing to really keep in mind, again, just try to keep those tools separate in your head, like what they do. And so you have GitHub on the web, and so that's where we're kind of storing our source code. We're collaborating with our collaborators, and we're also using that to build out the site and host CollectionBuilder GH up there. When we pull it down to our local machine, many of you used GitHub Desktop. And so what GitHub Desktop is it only does one thing. It works with Git in a visual way on your computer. So it can clone a repository down, it can push and pull and make commits, but it can't edit files. The only thing it does is work with Git and GitHub, making that connection between your local machine and that web version of your source code. And then we've been working with Visual Studio Code, and that's our code editor. And so all this is a text editor. And so if you can imagine Microsoft Word with like the absolute minimal set of features, and then that's what a text editor is. But then this text editor has a whole bunch of extra features to make working on a big project like a source code of a website a little bit easier. So it has this built-in terminal, it has this file explorer on the side, but ultimately what you're doing with this is just editing text files, which are your source code for the site. And so this little panel right here, this text, you know, this editor, that's really what the meat and the heart and the point of having a text editor is all about. All these other things are just little extras to help you do some work in an efficient manner. And so that in mind, did anyone have questions about the tools and how they overlap and how they don't overlap? Or confusions about what was doing what? Just let me know if you have more questions about that, because it's super confusing. So we've all kind of worked on GitHub and in our local machine, and now we're kind of at this final step where maybe you want to publish your site, and most of these sites are actually already published on the web using GitHub Pages. But I wanted to just make a quick distinction here that's important if you're going to publish your site not on GitHub Pages. right now, when we've been testing out our sites, we've been going in here and we do a bundle exec Jekyll S, which stands for Jekyll serve. And what Jekyll serve's purpose is to build the site and then serve it up on a local server on your machine, only your machine, so that you can click through it on your local machine and do your iterative work at customizing your site, changing your metadata, changing your objects and all that, and see what happens immediately in real time. And so that serving is on your local machine. And the important thing to know is that all of the links that it creates for when it's building the site are local specific. So they're only they're going to use this this URL that's, oh, sorry, I'm getting some. They're going to use this URL that has this local host address in it. So 27.0.0.1 and port 4000. So that's my local host, and this is only on my machine. It doesn't go anywhere else. And the important thing to know about that is that if you took those files that it outputs at this point, it's going to have all of those links in it, and it's not going to work if you put it on the web. And so if you want to actually build this for the web in its final location, what you are actually going to have to do is do a bundle exec Jekyll build. Actually, we have to give it a, and so Jekyll build is actually going to not use those local links. It's going to use the links that you actually have configured in config.yaml. In our case, we aren't using those because on GitHub Pages, we don't need to do that. So if you wanted to deploy this somewhere else, you should check the documentation to see the details of how that works, because you'll actually have to give it a local, the correct variables here, so that the links that are in the site actually match where they actually will be on the web in its final location. The one other thing that if you're going to build it, we have a lot of the features, the analytics, if you add Google Analytics or Matimo or some other alternative analytics, and all of the meta markup, this extra rich machine readable markup that's added into the head of the page, aren't built when you do Jekyll S, and even if you do Jekyll build. And so we have to give it this Jekyll environment equals production, and on GitHub Pages that's automatically handled for you, to make it actually build out all those extra functions and features into the final site. And so this is what the final command ends up looking like if you had to do this manually. And we actually have a helper for that in the other repositories, but we don't have it on the GitHub Pages version because that's generally not, most people are generally hosting it on GitHub Pages. So if I give it this final command, we're going to actually build out the entire site with all of this meta markup, with the analytics, if we've added analytics, and with the correct variables for the location on the web. So this is what it would look like if we were actually deploying this kind of on our own infrastructure rather than on GitHub Pages. You would actually give this build command. You're going to let it build, and I'm going to go into this folder here. So here's my project folder, the DHSI demo 2022, and I got to go in that folder, and I got to let it to finish build. And you're going to see that there's all these folders in here. This is your project that we've been looking at. And there's this one that says _site. And so that is where the site is actually built out to. So you don't ever edit the stuff in _site, because it's just going to get, every time that you do a Jekyll serve or a Jekyll build, everything in there is going to get deleted and then rebuilt again. So you don't, that's not your source code. It's just the output of the generator. And so you have all the source code is what you need to create that output. So you don't need to ever save this output until you're actually deploying it somewhere. So if I look in _site, what I'm going to see is actually a bunch of HTML files. And so this is the actual site that you're looking at on GitHub when you're looking at the live web version. This is what is up there. And if I wanted to deploy this somewhere else, what I would do is actually exactly that. I would, in this case, in our infrastructure, our IT gives us a plain static server, and they have they have it mapped just as a file. And so I can just actually go ahead and navigate into it and then just copy some files into there. A lot of times you'll might be familiar if you've used Reclaim Host or something, of using FTP is the traditional way to do this. But now on Mac and Windows and on Linux, you can actually map those FTP drives or Samba drives as just looks like a normal folder of files on your computer. And so this is what it is. This is actually our server. These are files that are on our server. And I can actually just have a new folder that would be the DHSI demo. Oops. And so this would be the home of this new collection. And I would just go ahead and I like to Control A to copy them all, or to select them all, and then Control C to copy them all. And then I would just Control V to put those all into this folder on our web server. And so a lot of times if you did this on FTP or FTP client, it would be the same kind of thing. Like you select some folders of files and you just put that onto your server. And a lot of times if you're updating your server, you would essentially just be copying over the existing files, and you would replace those with your new updated versions of it. And then once all of these files are onto that server, then we have a live website on our static server. And so this is what your website actually looks like on the web. That's the magic of deploying. All right, so if using GitHub Pages to do that deploy and build is really convenient and helpful, and you can actually keep using it for these collections and for more complicated collections as well. And one thing that you can do to make it a little bit more customized to your institution or your project is you can actually add a custom domain onto your GitHub. So you can still have it building on GitHub, but there's an option in the settings there where you can go and add a custom domain. So you can, rather than having your username github.io/repository name for your URL, you can go and actually set up your own custom domain for your project, or a subdomain of one of your current domains that you own, if that's of interest. So that's definitely possible to just keep using GitHub and that build service that's built in for you, so you don't have to manually do it. But it is just important to understand that you're relying on that third-party service to do this work for you, which may or may not be sustainable, or your IT may not want you to be doing that. And so there is a lot of alternatives to build it manually and use actually other third-party services, and all of that is in our docs with some examples that you can use. And so there's a lot of growing hosts out there that can do this for you. And there's lots of free options actually also out there. Devin likes to use a service called Render, which is pretty easy to get it set up. And then you have to connect with your GitHub to this third-party service. And then you can get these little domains that are kind of temporary and easy to take down and put up, which is pretty handy for collaborating with people. And being able to, just kind of temporarily put it up and let people look at it and then take it down again when you're done. So there's lots of different ways to build and host it when you want to deploy this as a project. The limitations on GitHub that you're going to run into pretty quickly with GitHub Pages is that it's not designed for having a whole bunch of file storage on it. And so GitHub, the Collection Builder GH, we've really designed it for these small collections where you have a handful of, web quality images, not like your TIFF images, because on your Collection Builder GH pages, we're only, there's only one file name. There's no derivatives. There's no thumbnails. There's no thumbnails for like your audio files and your PDFs. There's no previews of those. And so if you have these PDFs that are 100 megs, you really don't want to have, that doesn't really work well for the user experience on GitHub Pages. And so that's when you want to start looking at the other options that are available to you with our other templates. And then you're also going to run out of space on GitHub really quickly as soon as if you add all of your objects into your GitHub pages, your Collection Builder project repository. So that's where we start looking at different ways to deploy your final site. So I just wanted to really go over that quick. I know that was like way too quick and probably didn't help that much, but there's some documentation. And if you get to that stage where you're like, I want to move this project to the next level, where I'm deploying it on our own infrastructure, that's where you can, reach out to us and ask us questions to clarify that, or and talk to your IT people and say, like, I just need a static server. I don't need anything on it, just static file space. And you can get that. And Reclaim Host is one that we've used often, and a lot of people use in academics that can work really easily for this sort of deployment. So yeah, any questions there about how do I get it deployed to the web if it's not on GitHub, or anything to add, Devin and Olivia?
So I just went and checked the site that Evan just built, and it's pretty broken, but the reason is I think the URL and base URL was set to the wrong place.
Yeah, I did not actually set up the base URLs, so that's totally broken. I will do that in the background, just to show you that that's possible, but I didn't want to waste a bunch of time doing it right now.
No, yeah. So I mean that little part on that config YAML that we skip over when we're doing GH, if you plan to deploy to another server, that's a very important part to put out the the base URL and then whatever directory it's going to go in on that base URL in those two places. And that's the most common error we see if people are like, it just looks like a weird blank page, or CSS is broken because the connections don't happen. So that's the one piece we don't. That's like the formats and formats in your metadata and file names. These are the places where this most often breaks, and that's one of those to remember. Great.
I just have a question of clarification that I don't want to forget to ask before we leave. I understand this is the first time I participated in a conference, and I understand from a lot of the email we've gotten, of course, there are, not to be shared and what have you, but the course pack that you have provided to us is something that we can keep, right? And we can always use that to work our way through your collection documentation.
Yeah, so we have a little bit different outlook than DHSI on this stuff. We'll actually download this course pack into a PDF and put it into our OSF, and we'll send that link out to you. And all those videos are on YouTube, and we don't care. You can share it. You can reuse it. We would be happy if you did so.
All right, thank you.
So we'll have that all out for you, and it's not going to go away.
We're also happy to.
Collection Builder doc is out there.
And we're happy to answer questions from any of you if you are working a few weeks down the road and something comes up. Just feel free to email us.
Yeah, no, please do feel free. We enjoy this work, and we're happy to support it. And our dean supports us supporting it, which is nice. Great. Are we ready for show and tell? Is there anyone who's brave enough?
I'm going to stop the recording.
To go first.
All right, thanks. Okay, so because we've already talked quite a bit about the differences between GH and these other templates, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on it, but we think that Collection Builder GH is really great for teaching, learning, prototyping, and then exhibits. Just something that you want to get out there quickly and get it up there, and you don't necessarily have to spend a giant amount of time putting it together. So it's really good. We have examples of that with people in our special collections wanted to, put together a pandemic collection. It's obviously agile, something that was happening and topical, and they were able to pull together a digital collection, get it published really, really quickly. So it's really good for that. The limitations, as we've gone over a lot, is just the size of the objects and the lack of image derivatives. So you don't have thumbnails and smalls, so you can't really put really large, huge images in there. One thing that we're developing right now, and is kind of a new thing, is Collection Builder Sheets, and so it's not totally fleshed out yet, but the idea on Collection Builder Sheets is it's the same as Collection Builder GH, but it can directly connect to a spreadsheet that is published on the web. And in the case, one of those places that you can publish from the web is Google Sheets. And so because it's going to be directly parsing a Google Sheet that's live on the web, you can actually show, you can work in real time and show the changes that you've made in your metadata all of a sudden, doing something immediately. So I'm going to share my screen here. And so here's our CollectionBuilder sheets. And if we go over to this about and the metadata guidelines, here's a template for the sheet. And you click that and you just make your own copy of that spreadsheet. And there's just a bunch of empty rows in this template. So if you match this template, it'll work automatically with what's already configured in CollectionBuilder sheets. What I do with a lot of times with our students is actually bring them over to our own digital collections, and we can do some curation. So if I'll just do this really quick. So we go to this collection and we want them to, explore those collections and maybe do some curation of items that are relevant to their research. And so here's this people playing Ultimate Frisbee. I could actually just, there's this download link, but I could also just copy the link to that image here and use that as the file name in there. And then I could give it a title. They could either copy the title from the existing metadata. So a student's chasing a Frisbee. I actually think that they're playing Ultimate. I can't spell. And then, you can fill in all this metadata. So, and then how you publish this is you go over on Google Sheets, you go over to File, and make available online. Oh, wait, no, that's not what I want. Sorry. Where am I?
Go to share.
Share, there we are. Thank you, Devin. Publish to the web. And then there's this place where you can have sheet 1, and I want to share it as a comma separated values, and then publish. And yes, I want that to happen. And it's going to give me this this URL that's to this sheet, the live version of it. It's just the CSV published on the web. And so I can copy that, and I can actually even replace the metadata on this live website. And so I paste it in here just to show an example. And suddenly all of the demo data that was there is replaced by the sheet, which is totally 100% broken right now because there's nothing in it except we have this one object. But you can imagine, if you will, that there's actually some really neat things that you can do here with live data and being able to collaborate. And so a lot of times what our data, what you find is, so let's reset all of that. We go back to the default again. What you find is that there's all these teachable moments when you work with your metadata, and all of a sudden you find that there's stuff over here and some down over here in Antarctica, and then we debug that metadata. There's teachable moments when we get over to the subjects and they start to see weird things that really don't make any sense, and we go in there and start fixing those. And so it really opens up some opportunities for this, this focusing on that metadata, seeing it change live and how that metadata impacts the website, and also the ability for users to discover things on the website, how the metadata interacts with the actual ability to, or critically interacts with the ability for users to use the collections and discover things of interest. And so we think that it's a really neat opportunity that opens up, some stuff in the classroom. So that's CollectionBuilder sheets, and it's not totally complete at this point. So not everything is functioning. Mainly the thing that's not functioning is the about pages are not functioning right now, but you could use it for everything else. And I gave that example of History 454 that we use that in class right now. Devin, I think you had a couple, you wanted to show some of that other.
Yeah, let me just show
sheets.
you. I'll show you one example. There's a couple of examples that I have. This was a work with a sociology professor who's working with incarcerated students, and they wanted to create essentially an offline digital collection but she's working with her students to do that. And so we're using Sheets for this project just to kind of like get the material that are going to be used in these college classes for incarcerated students. There are a lot of strictures about what you can use when you work with the prisons, and so they have to kind of like vet this in many different ways. But right now there's just 2 undergrads who are adding sort of specific, they upload their objects to a GitHub repository, and then they create this sheet. And then I actually have a second sheet that interprets that into the kind of website generator. And that's what happens here. And so they'll add things, and then they have this little refresh button, and that goes and pulls everything from that and just builds that quickly. And then the second one, let me just find this really quick. Oh, and so there's one other project here. Let me. Oh, I just went away from it. Sorry. So this is a work with a dramaturg in our theater department, and she wanted a way to kind of collaboratively work with Shakespeare. And so we're using the same code from CollectionBuilder Sheets to kind of, it's obviously heavily modified, but you can go into, she's worked with her students then to do an annotation of Midsummer Night's Dream. And we're going to have this available for any Shakespeare play that you want. And we're going to work with some undergrads and some high school students this year. And so you see, you add the annotations here. All of this metadata is already available for you. And then if you want to see this, just like we saw there, you grab that, change that to CSV, and grab it. And then so they'll be able to just do this to just grab that piece, and then whenever they update it, they'll see the new annotations that they've done, and then they'll be able to refresh and go through, and then you can see, that's annotated there. There's some styles in here. You can see, like, it kind of defines some of the terms and things like that. I need to talk slower, I'm sorry. But so there's a lot of we're really excited about this kind of, it uses a thing called pop-up parse, but it's sort of disconnecting a little bit from Ruby and some of that underneath, and letting us kind of directly integrate pieces from Google Sheets, but also kind of keep it even less tied down to a software ecosystem, which I think is really exciting as well. Stop.
And when you work on this project, then having it on Sheets is for that instant collaboration and prototyping. And at a certain point, when you want to be done with that stage, that rapid prototyping stage, you can actually just download that sheet and then put it into the project, and then it's just a totally self-contained project again. It doesn't depend on that connection with Google Sheets once you put the metadata into the project itself. So it can still be 100% self-contained and not relying on that outside infrastructure too. The only other thing that we wanted to really super quickly introduce is, so I think that people have a good idea about what CollectionBuilder CSV is like at this point. And the main difference you could take your metadata from your current project and you can actually just pop it in here, but it's not going to be able to automatically build on GitHub unless you add a GitHub action or use a third-party service. And there's documentation that can explain that. But the main difference in the metadata is that when you had on CollectionBuilder GH, you had a format field, which is kind of how it decides what to display. And then you had a file name field. And so you just have one file that represents that object. On CollectionBuilder CSV, we have a field called the display template, which decides how it's going to be displayed on the item page. So there's a lot more flexibility there. And then we also have 3 columns that will have the derivatives. So you have an object location, which is kind of like the full-sized, the download button for your item. So maybe that's like a huge file, like a TIFF or something like that. And then you have an image small, that's just an image that can be displayed as a representation, and an image thumb. And so in that case, perhaps you have audio files and you still have like a cover image of that, or, so there's different flexibilities that you want to display some kind of derivative of the object, even though the object download is either a large file or, something that wouldn't have an image associated with it in general. And so that just opens up a lot of flexibility to put all kinds of images or items from different locations, like in different repositories or in the repository or in some other kind of hosting service, or isn't an object at all. It's just a metadata record. And so there's a lot of flexibility that gets built into just changing that and putting it into the metadata so that work can be done there in the metadata. And then one little helper that's built into there, which I just want to bring to your eyes, and you can read more about it if you're interested, is we have this thing called the Rake file that has a bunch of little helper things that are written in Ruby that allow you to do some things quickly in your repository. So one of the helpers is to create it. You throw all your PDFs and any kind of image file into this objects folder, and we have a helper that's called Rake generate derivatives. And so we would just do Rake is a command in Ruby, and we paste in generate derivatives is the command that this little tasks that we've set up. And what that does is it actually runs through this objects folder, and it looks at all of the items that are in there. And for the ones that are supported, which are PNGs, TIFFs, JPEGs, and things like that, image files, and then PDFs, it can go ahead and create a thumbnail image and a small image from those automatically. And then once it's done that, it generates this little base CSV that will have the locations of all of those objects that are in there and the file names of them, so that you can use that as a starting point for building out your objects. And so it's just a really quick little helper to generate some of those things that's built in there. And there's some other helpers in there that can like rename your files and things like that, that are just, they're helper tasks, some automation. So there's a lot to that. And obviously we don't have time to get into it, but just trying to get that on your radar in case you start going farther. And then we just had two more essentially links that we wanted to share with you. So obviously our context is working in the library. So a lot of our way that we kind of frame static web is in library lingo. And so we have actually a community site called libstatic, where a lot of people are pursuing static web-based infrastructure projects, scholarship projects in libraries. And so this is kind of a community where we're trying to pull together a lot of examples of those projects and a lot of what we call, models. So models of people who have used static web approaches to build out their projects, and then models that are for creating projects like CollectionBuilder. So it's a framework for creating a static web project. And so that's a community that you can go check out if you're looking for some examples of scholarship, and just one of the things that the main thing that we want to get out there is that this is a viable alternative that's actually has a lot of upside to it, in terms of sustainability, in terms of the ability to learn and build skills that really sustain work in DH and in digital scholarship, and then empower you to do new things. And so we think there's a lot of potential there. And obviously this, as I said, is in the language of librarians, which is where we're coming from. But, obviously a lot of this applies in the DH community and in digital scholarship community in general. So reach out if you have questions about that. And then the last bit is we have a project led up by Olivia called Learn Static. As you can see with our very clever, we're really good at making titles of things. And this one is a project that we are wrapping up this summer. And we worked with faculty in the classrooms at University of Oregon and here to prototype using static web templates to do some teaching in the classroom. And I guess I'll just let Olivia say anything.
Sure. We had a few different kind of types of projects. 3 of them revolved around digital collections. So the one that Evan shared with you earlier, that HIST 545 was one of those examples. We're basically just trying to demonstrate different ways you can use static web in the classroom without having to always go all in with every student creating, their own project or downloading software. There's really quite a lot of ways you can teach some basic digital literacy skills just by having them work through GitHub or in Google Sheets on spreadsheets. So it's been good so far. We're trying to get some feedback from our advisory board. I'll put an example student project in the chat here. In the class that I helped teach, we had students create a multimedia essay where they found a bunch of primary source material, and they really got into it, and also pulled in some text analysis visualizations and topic modeling graphs too. And the other project template for that is oral history as data. So Devin's leading that one, and I think I have a link to it here. We've created a lot of robust documentation around bringing these projects into the classroom too. So the link I just put in the chat is also an example of that, having documentation for students to be able to follow step by step, and for instructors to know how to start using this type of material in the classroom. So it's all still in development. It's not quite as far along as the lib static, but we're getting there, and we're getting a lot of good feedback from people so far that it's something they're interested in. I think is that it?
I think that's it.
If people need to run, feel free. And thank you all for joining us for a week. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank
So.
you.
Thanks, Claire.